Hello guys, Winston here. Today I'm flying down to Atlanta for WorkbenchCon, which for those of you that don't know is a new conference aimed at content creators in the field of making. In addition to a killer lineup of top tier makers, there's going to be a lot of cool people in general at WorkbenchCon and even potential sponsors. So in treating this as a networking event more than just a show to passively attend, I realized that I needed to seriously step up my personal branding game. My online presence, especially on YouTube, has largely been portrayed as an individual, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of people whose identities are their brand, but I feel like my image has traditionally lacked any semblance of organization behind it. I don't come across as someone with a direction. I'm just a maker trying to figure things out as I go. I've got no master business plan that'll end with me becoming self-employed. Yet. But even without a concrete roadmap, I do know that I need to build an identity that's in it for the long haul. Something that preserves my individuality but also makes it clear that I take this business seriously. And for that, I need a logo. Before I got started making one though, there was one major ground rule I wanted to set for myself. There would be no stereotypical maker or woodworking iconography allowed, i.e. things like light bulbs, gears, hammers, and saw blades. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but I just feel like they're so cliched and it wouldn't fit with my vision as a maker. This logo also had to be something I could make a branding iron for, so strong, discrete colors were a must, and it couldn't be too complex or nuanced. And of course, it would be cool if my initials could be worked in there somehow. I tried deriving logos from other companies or entities I knew, and I tried playing purely with lines and geometry, but nothing really resonated with me. Until my eye was drawn to this, a compression end mill. Take note of the alternating flutes. That arrangement, when unwrapped, becomes a really simple but elegant pattern. And it plays right into my initials. This is what that idea became. Ladies and gentlemen, my new logo. A geometric design that both identifies me and symbolizes subtractive manufacturing. Now, from this, my first priority was making a business card. My website and channel redesign could wait, WorkbenchCon was right around the corner. My idea was to laser etch and cut my business cards on veneer, which I will admit is not a new idea, but online ones cost a fair amount, especially if you opt for two-sided printing. And they're either really chunky and thick or really thin and fragile. Neither is good for carrying around in your pocket. The perfect solution in my mind was to use two different sheets of veneer stacked perpendicularly like plywood. This would let me get the most strength possible out of the thickness I had to work with, and it also opened up the possibility of doing something creative with contrasting colors of wood. After a couple sketches, my final idea was to use a light veneer on the front and a dark veneer on the back. My logo would be laser cut from the front so that it appeared in the darker wood. My name and social media info would be engraved but not through cut. I bought a variety pack of veneer on Amazon and headed to my friend's house to use his Glowforge. I'd prepared a vector file for my business cards and emailed it to him ahead of time. At his house, we made some minor adjustments to the SVG to color code different groups of lines so that the Glowforge would know which shapes to cut and which to score and engrave. We used magnets to keep the veneer flat and the Glowforge's camera to work around them. Since I'd purchased plain veneer, it didn't come with any sort of masking. To keep my cut edges as clean as possible, I had originally intended on masking the veneer with delicate surface frog tape. But we quickly discovered that HDX brand painter's tape was even lower tack. It was so bad in fact that it virtually peeled itself, but since it was way cheaper than frog tape, I just ended up using that instead. It took us about 4 tries to arrive at the optimal settings for veneer. We had to dial in the right power and balance it against the speed and acceleration of the laser. This is where I think a laser with a stationary tube and lightweight moving optics has a big advantage over the Glowforge's design. Once I had my pieces cut out, I went home to begin assembly. On the way back, I'd purchased some multi-purpose spray adhesive. In theory, you could use this stuff by spraying both sides, letting the surfaces dry for a few seconds before sticking the faces together for a permanent bond. If you want a temporary bond, you'd only spray one side. I wanted to use spray adhesive here instead of wood glue so I didn't have to deal with squeeze out. Once these had dried for 24 hours, I began applying a few coats of spray poly just to stabilize the wood. Unfortunately, because of the thin nature of veneer and the opposing directions of grain on either side, my business cards really wanted to bend. And if my experience with HDX brand adhesives had taught me anything before, I should have known that my glue bond was destined to fail. So, after my pieces were dry to the touch, I came back with some super glue to permanently fix my business cards. Where possible, I completely separated my veneer so that I could lay a bead of glue all the way around the card's perimeter. And since super glue is a lot less forgiving than spray adhesive when it comes to setup time, I clamped down some 1-2-3 blocks to use as a guide. This let me stick my two sides together with a high degree of confidence that the edges were aligned. Then, after I'd given my card some time to set, I gave the back side 2 coats of spray poly as well. Perfect. 24 business cards ready to go. What I now needed was a way to carry these on my person in an organized manner. These could get scattered quite easily in my backpack or damaged in my pocket. So I started working out a case to carry my business cards in. It had to be quick to deploy and also an interesting use of wood. Anyone can make a box, but unless it's elegant and efficient, it won't make an impression. So I came up with a business card holder that would use 2 magnets as dynamic hinges. It could be opened with either hand and the lid would pivot on whichever magnet didn't release. To keep the business cards accessible, I needed cutouts for my fingers, but instead of making big chunky walls with space for finger pockets, I decided to make the walls open in certain segments. Since my wood grain would run perpendicular to one of my box's faces, I couldn't make these cutouts left-right symmetric, otherwise I'd have a clearly defined weak axis going across my box. So I opted instead for rotational symmetry, with my finger cutouts offset towards one corner or another. I drew this up in Fusion 360 and chose a downcutting end mill for the job. This would keep my pockets and edges fuzz-free as well as minimize the chances of my walls breaking, or so I thought. Since my downcutting end mill was only 5/8 of an inch long, I had to keep my design below that height. It would save me a lot of time if I'd faced off that stock with a larger end mill to around that thickness before proceeding. Notice here that I'm using double-sided tape in a bit of a triangle arrangement. This was to ensure that I had 3 solid points of contact to hold my material in a stable fashion since it has a bit of warp across its length. However, once I had a solid reference surface that I knew was dead flat, I could switch to masking tape workholding. I like using masking tape in this case because I could get 100% coverage on the base of my box without making it obnoxiously difficult to remove later. I needed this piece supported all the way to the edges because of how fragile my walls were. I did a quick pass with a 1/4-inch end mill to take care of the bulk of my material removal before coming in to do a delicate cleanup of my walls with the 1/8-inch downcutting end mill. I made sure my main pocketing operation used a step over with a small enough overlap to ensure good surface finish. Then I contoured around my walls to bring them to final dimension. That was a mistake and it came back to bite me on the second attempt. I thought I'd make 2 or 3 just to have a backup to sell, but that idea quickly went out the window. On my second attempt, I struck disaster, or more accurately, my end mill struck a wall that had moved on me. That wall had been over a superglue void and it wasn't as secure as I thought it was. What I should have done was put down more masking tape than I needed so that I could afford to have excess superglue squeeze out. This would ensure a bond right up to the very edge of my stock. Furthermore, the order of operations left me with an unnecessarily weak piece. The extra stock that I had left in the middle pocket after my 1/4-inch end mill operation actually made the entire piece stronger. I should have cleaned up that extra material last. These were solid lessons learned on my part. For the lid of my business card holder, I opted for maple. I had some 1/4-inch boards that could be faced and cut out with minimal waste. Once I had my base and my lid, I put a light chamfer on their edges with sandpaper just so that these felt good in hand and applied spray poly. Then I glued in neodymium magnets. This is how it turned out, and I was thrilled with the functionality. If I could do it all again though, I'd try and source some magnets that were either 2mm or 3/32 of an inch thick. These 16th-inch magnets work, but a little extra strength wouldn't hurt. And that wraps up my business card project for networking at WorkbenchCon. I'm really looking forward to meeting some cool people there in the next few days, and if you're going to be in the area too, hit me up on social media. I would love to meet you guys between sessions or after hours and chat about all things creative. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll be back with more CNC related content in a week or 2.